Wildfires and Wildcats, I have missed you so much. I hope that you had a relaxing spring break with your families at home. Maybe you were catching up on homework, maybe you weren't. Maybe you were watching movies or reading stories or playing games together. I hope that you had so much fun, and now we're starting to get ready to head back to school. Now, school might look a little different. It might not be in our classroom at Equitas. It's going to be on a computer, just like this. Make sure that your parents are following any text messages that they get to tell them when to go to school, to get you your laptop, your charger, and your headphones so that you can do all of your learning with me, Miss Sills, and Miss Cole over the next few weeks to keep your brains growing. But until then, I know that we need to finish Judy Blume's, otherwise known as Sheila the Great. So for the rest of this week, we're going to read 2 chapters every day to make sure that we get to finish our chapter book before we start our virtual learning lessons. So I can't wait to see where we left off. Starting on chapter 8. Take a second before I begin to think about where we left off. I remember Sheila and her family had just gone to a new house to spend the summer. And I know that boys usually live in that house. I know that they had summer camp. Oh my gosh. And Sheila was going to learn how to swim and make new friends. But she had a little trouble telling the truth. I wonder how we will build onto that in these next chapters. Let's read to find out. Chapter 8. One gray, cloudy Saturday afternoon, Mrs. Ellis said she had to do some shopping. Mouse didn't want to go, so her mother said she could stay at our house. Mouse gave me yo-yo lessons for half an hour, and all that time I wished there was something I could do better than Mouse and the other kids in Tarrytown. If only they had to live in the city for a month, I thought. Then I'd show them plenty. Probably not one of them could take a crosstown bus without getting lost. When we got tired of yo-yoing, Mouse said, "Let's call the twins and see if they can come over." The twins are Sandra and Jane Van Arden. They swim at the pool, too. They don't look anything alike. Sandra is very shy and quiet, and she always looks at your feet when you talk to her. They are both pretty good swimmers, but I have never seen Sandra dunk anyone. That's why I like her better than Jane. When Mouse called them, they said they would be right over because if they stayed home, their mother was going to make them clean out their closets. When they got back to my house, we had a snack of Oreos and milk. Sandra and Jane opened their cookies and eat all the icing first. I used to do that, but Libby said I was disgusting. When we were finished with our snack, Mouse said, "Want to play indoor hide and seek?" "Hey, yeah," Jane said. "At your house, Mouse." "But we can't," I said. "Her mother isn't home." Mouse and Jane left then, and Sandra said, "There's a special way to get into the Mouse house when her mother isn't home." "And just wait till you see it," Jane said. So we walked down the road to Mouse's, and when we got there, the girls showed me the milk door. It's a small door on the side of the house near the kitchen. Mouse unlatched it and said, "See, this is where the milkman puts our stuff. My mother never has to go outside to get it. Isn't that neat?" "Yeah," I said, "it's really neat. It's kind of like a built-in milk box." "Right," Jane said, "only it's not a box because it leads right into the house." I'm going to pause right there. They're talking about a milkman and a milk door because a long time ago, instead of going to the grocery store or the market to get your milk, there was actually a milkman who would come and bring milk to your house. Just like the mailman brings mail to your house, milk used to be brought to your house by a milkman. So there had to be somewhere special to put that milk once it was delivered. Mouse boosted Jane up, and Jane crawled through the milk door. Then Sandra boosted Mouse, and she crawled through. I gave Sandra a boost and was wondering who would boost me when Sandra cried, "Help! I'm stuck!" "You can't be," Mouse said. "I am," Sandra yelled. "I really am." "You need to go on a diet," Jane called from inside. "Please do something," Sandra begged. Since I was the only one left on the outside, I pulled Sandra's legs, trying to get her to back out. When that didn't work, Jane and Mouse pulled from the inside, hoping to get her through the milk door. But nothing happened. Sandra cried, "I'm doomed! I'll be here forever!" Jane said we should call the fire department and let them chop her out, but Mouse said her mother might get mad about that. I could see that unless I took charge of the situation, nothing would get done. So I said, "Mouse, you and Jane open the regular door and help me on the outside." "I never thought of that," Mouse said. "You should have," I told her, "because if you had been the only one to crawl through the milk door in the first place, none of this would have happened. You could have unlocked the back door, and we all could have walked through it like normal human beings." Mouse didn't answer me, but she and Jane did what I told them to and joined me on the outside. "Okay," I said, "now pull Sandra by the legs." All three of us pulled as hard as we could, but she still wouldn't budge. "We need rope. Do you have any?" I asked Mouse. "I think so," she said. "In the garage?" "Well, don't just stand there. Go get it." Mouse ran to the garage and came back with the rope. I tied it onto Sandra's ankles, and we all pulled and pulled until we got her out. By that time, she was crying for real, and her ankles were full of rope burns. "We've got to carry her inside now," I said. "I'll take her arms. Mouse, you take her legs, and Jane, you grab her middle." As we were carrying her into the house, Sandra kept screaming, "Put me down! Put me down!" Some people don't know when other people are trying to help them. We got her into the kitchen and put her down on the floor. Mouse said, "Oh, her legs are a mess. The bandages are upstairs. We better get her up there too." "That's crazy," I said. "You go get the bandages and some first aid cream, and we'll fix her up down here." So Mouse ran upstairs and came back with a million little tubes and bottles and bandages, and we all played doctor, fixing Sandra up. Of course, I was the only one who knew just which medicine to put on each of Sandra's wounds, so I was really the main doctor, and the other were my assistants. We must have done a good job, because Sandra stopped crying and said her legs felt much better. She even managed to walk up the stairs so we could start our game of hide and seek. Mouse told Sandra she didn't have to be it because she had already suffered enough. The only rules to indoor hide and seek were we had to stay upstairs and the attic was off limits. Homebase was the sink in the hall bathroom. We did once, twice, three, shoot. Once, twice, thrice, shoot. Rock, paper, scissors, just like us. To see who would be it. I lost. I hate to be it, especially in a strange place. I always get this creepy feeling. And I've never played hide and seek before, except with Daddy. And that's not the same at all, because nobody's going to pop out from under something and scare me. But I closed my eyes and counted to 75 before I hollered, "Ready or not, here I come." I was supposed to count to 100, but I'm sure nobody noticed. If they did, I would just tell them I'm a very fast counter. The house was quiet, except for some squeaks now and then. I wanted to find the others in a hurry so I wouldn't be all alone. I walked from bedroom to bedroom, but I didn't search under the beds or in the closets. I was afraid of what I might find. Suppose Washington Irving left something behind when he slept here 100 years ago. I wonder if the Headless Horseman ever comes inside houses. If he does, I know he would choose this one, because it's so old he would feel at home. I went into Betsy's room. Ooch was on her bed. I made a lot of noise, hoping one of the others would hear me and laugh. But no one did. Just as I was coming out of Betsy's room, Jane made a mad dash for the hall bathroom and yelled, "Home for y'all!" Now at least I had some company. I was glad she came out, even though I didn't catch her. I had to concentrate on finding Mouse or Sandra. If they all got home free, I would wind up as it again. Jane walked around with me, and we found Sandra sitting in the bathtub in Mr. and Mrs. Ellis's bathroom. Now all we needed was Mouse. We looked and looked, but we couldn't find her. Finally, Jane said, "Do you suppose she's in the laundry chute again?" "No," Sandra said. "She got in awful trouble that last time. Remember?" "What laundry chute?" I asked. "Oh, it's this hole in the wall where Mrs. Ellis drops the dirty clothes. They fall down to the basement where she does the wash. Come on, let's look." Now, I'm making a connection here. They're talking about a laundry chute, a hole in the wall that you can put your dirty clothes down into, and it falls downstairs into the laundry. But I know that in one of my apartments that I lived in California, there was what they call a garbage chute, which we would take our garbage bag, we would open and put the garbage bag down the chute, and it would go down the stairs into the big dumpster outside. I wonder if you have a laundry chute or a garbage chute, either where you live now or maybe where you've lived before. Let's keep reading. We walked down the long hallway to the attic door. Next to it was a smaller door that looked like an oven. Jane pulled it open and looked inside. "No mouse," she said. "How did she hide in there? Didn't she fall down to the basement?" I asked. "Oh, she can really hang on," Jane said. "The last time her mother caught her, and she got it good," Sandra told me. "Where do you suppose she is?" I asked. "Who knows?" Jane said. Just then, we all heard a scary noise. Ooh, ooh. All three of us grabbed hold of each other, and Sandra started laughing like crazy. Then Jane started, so I laughed as loud as they did, even louder to show I thought it was funny too. Ooh, ooh. Jane pulled away and flung open the attic door. Mouse shouted, "Boo!" and jumped out at us. "Ha ha, I really scared you." "Scared who?" I asked. "You think a little noise like that scared us?" "Yeah," Sandra said. "We all knew it was you. And besides that," I told Mouse, "you broke the rules. The attic is supposed to be off limits. You said so yourself." "Yeah," Sandra and Jane said together. I didn't want to play any more hide and seek after that, but Mouse promised not to scare us again. She said she'd even be it just to show what a good sport she is. So Sandra, Jane, and me hid while Mouse stood at the sink and counted up to 100. No cheating allowed. I ran to Mrs. Ellis's room and hid inside her closet. My heart was thumping so loud I thought it might explode, and that would be the end of me. I crouched in the corner and waited. I never know when to run for home base. Other kids get home free. Why don't I? I sat still for a long time. Why didn't Mouse come? Should I try for home base? I heard footsteps. So she was finally going to have a look in her mother's room, I thought. Oh, it's about time. The footsteps came closer and closer. I hid behind a long bathrobe. Maybe she wouldn't find me after all. And as soon as she was gone, I could run for home base. The closet door opened. I peeked out from behind the robe, and all I saw were feet. They didn't belong to Mouse. They were much too big. Whoever it was started moving the clothes around. The robe I was hiding behind wiggled, and then there was a terrible scream. "Ah!" I think it came from me. "Sheila Tubman!" Mrs. Ellis shouted. "You nearly scared me to death!" I tried to say something, but I couldn't make the words come out. I was shaking. Mrs. Ellis reached down and helped me up. "Come out of there," she said. "What are you doing in my closet?" "I don't know," I told her. "You better know. I'm waiting to hear your answer." "Well, you see," I began. And then Mouse, Sandra, and Jane came into the room. "Hi, Mom," Mouse said. "Mouse, what is going on here?" Mrs. Ellis asked. "We were playing a little hide and seek," Mouse said. "You were supposed to be at Sheila's house," her mother said. "Mrs. Tubman is going crazy trying to find you." "No kidding," Mouse said. "That's right," Mrs. Ellis turned to me. "Sheila, go and call your mother right now and tell her where you are." That night, Mr. Ellis boarded up the milk door, and Mrs. Ellis put a regular milk box outside. And we all knew that was the end of our indoor hide and seek at the Mouse House. Chapter 9. But before we go to Chapter 9, I want you to stop and take a quick pause to think about what happened in Chapter 8. Somebody wanted, but, so, then. How can you tell a summary or the central idea of Chapter 8? Who were their main characters? What did they want? What was their motivation? Was there a problem? A solution? A lesson learned? I want you to tell your family if you're listening together, or if you're listening all by yourself, ring ring and tell Wilbur. I just might have a special surprise for you at the end of Chapter 9. Take a second and tell that central idea to your family or to Wilbur on the phone. Go. let's move on to chapter 9. I wonder what new problem that Mouse and her new friends with Sheila and all those others might get into in this chapter. After 3 weeks of day camp, my favorite activity is still pottery. Mouse, Russ Bindell, and Sam Sweeney agree. The 4 of us haven't switched activities yet, even though we were supposed to try something new every week. Denise says by the end of summer, we should each have a really good bowl to take home with us. My mother is not as happy about pottery as I am. This is because I come home covered with clay every day. It even gets in my hair and my ears. The only bad things about pottery are I have to put up with a lot of shampoos, and my mom is always chasing me with Q-tips. Russ Bindell's mother runs the camp office. She's pretty nice. Russ looks just like her. He's a year older than me, but so small he looks about 8. And between Russ and his mother, I have never seen so many freckles. Sam Sweeney reminds me of Peter Hatcher. He thinks he knows everything. And when his clay elephant broke in the kiln, he blamed it on me and Mouse for making too much noise while it was baking. Denise told him it wasn't anybody's fault, and maybe he left too many cracks in his elephant, because besides breaking in half, one tusk also fell off. Sam is the only one of us who doesn't use the pottery wheel. He's always making animals, and elephants are his favorite. I can't imagine what he does with all of his elephants. Mouse and I call him Babar in private. Of course, we can't stay at pottery all day. That's our main activity, from 9:30 until lunchtime. After lunch, we are supposed to have a quiet hour. We usually break up into small groups and sit under the trees. Most of our counselors play the guitar, and we sing a lot. I have learned some very unusual songs at day camp. One is about Anne Boleyn, who was married to King Henry VIII of England. But when she didn't have any boy babies, he decided she should have her head chopped off. And in this song, she is back haunting King Henry's castle, with her head tucked underneath her arm. I like to sing the song, but I don't like to think about her walking around like that. She reminds me of the Headless Horseman. This morning, Denise asked me to go to the camp office to tell Mrs. Bindell that she is expecting an important phone call. When I got there, Mrs. Bindell was trying to use the copy machine. "I can't believe this," she said. "It's jammed again." I watched for a while as she tried to get it working. "Want me to help you?" I asked. "That's very nice of you, Sheila, but you better get back to your activity. And tell Denise I'll come and get her when her phone call comes through." I still didn't go, because all of a sudden I had the greatest idea of how to show the Terrytown kids that I was an expert at something besides bandaging legs. "We had a class newspaper last year," I told Mrs. Bindell. "I used to run off the copies in the office. Nobody had to help me. I did it all by myself." "That must have been very interesting," Mrs. Bindell said. She was trying to pull the jammed paper out of the copier. "It was. I could use your computer and copier if we had a camp newspaper, couldn't I?" "But we don't have a camp newspaper." She had the copier pulled apart now. "We should," I said. "Should what?" she asked. "Have a camp newspaper." "But we don't." "Maybe we will," I called, running out of the office. I ran right into Mr. Hillstrom, the director of our camp. He caught me so I didn't fall down. "What's your hurry?" he asked. "Oh, Mr. Hillstrom, you're just the one I want to see," I told him. "Do you know what we need here?" "No." "What?" "A newspaper, a camp newspaper, and I've decided it's my duty to start one." Mr. Hillstrom said, "That's a very good idea. I knew you'd think so. I'll be in charge of everything," I said. "You may need some help, Sheila. Suppose I let you announce your plans this afternoon. Then you can form committees and get started." "I don't need committees," I said. "I'm very experienced. I know exactly what to do." "Running a newspaper is a big job," Mr. Hillstrom said, "and nobody does it alone." "I can do it, Mr. Hillstrom. You'll see. I've even got a name picked out." "What is it?" he asked. "It's a surprise. You'll find out next Friday when you read the first issue." "Well," Mr. Hillstrom said, "you seem determined to try it on your own. So, good luck." I ran back to pottery and told everyone about our new camp newspaper. "When's it coming out?" Mouse asked. "On Friday," I said, "and I'm going to be very busy between now and then. I may have to skip pottery. You know, it's a big job to put out a paper all by yourself." "That's just what I was thinking," Denise said. "What you need is a committee." Committee. Team. "Maybe you could get a reporter from each group to tell what's going on." "I'll help you," Mouse said. "I'd like to be a reporter." I don't need any reporters, I told everyone. I can do this all by myself. But if I'm a reporter, we can work together, Mouse said. We can be a team. It's my idea, and I'm doing everything, I told her. Well, if that's the way you want to be about it, Mouse said. I could tell that Mouse was wishing she had thought of the idea of having a camp newspaper, and Russ and Sam were really surprised that I knew so much about it. Is my mother going to type it into the computer for you? Russ asked. Of course not, I told him. I know how to use a computer. That night, I wrote my first story. I called it Babar Strikes Again. It was all about Sam Sweeney and his clay elephants, but of course, I never mentioned him by name. Starting the next morning, I made my rounds of all the activities. I carried my pad around with me and kept a pencil tucked behind my ear. I jotted down all kinds of interesting things and story ideas, such as Libby the Dancing Skeleton and the real reason Denise goes barefoot. I discovered that at lunch. I was crawling around listening to bits of conversation when I noticed the bottoms of Denise's feet. She was sitting on the grass leaning against a tree, and the bottoms of her feet pointed up. I don't know how I ever missed seeing this before. They are covered in warts. No wonder she doesn't wear shoes. The next day was very hot, and as I trudged around from activity to activity, I wondered what Mouse, Russ, and Sam were doing at pottery. I didn't come up with any new story ideas, so I wrote a weather report, arranged a list of do's and don'ts about the camp bus, and made up a crossword puzzle of counselors' names. I offered a prize to the first person to hand it in with all the right names. On Thursday, I went to the office to type the first edition of my camp newspaper. I figured it would only take a few minutes, and then I could go back to pottery. I was starting to miss Mouse and my regular camp routine. Mouse and Russ were probably having a lot of fun with the pottery wheel, and with me out of the way, they'd each have extra turns. But Mrs. Bindell said she was having a very busy day and couldn't possibly give up her computer. I have to use it, I told her. I have a newspaper to get out. Well, I'm sorry, Sheila. She went back to her work. After a minute, she looked up at me and sighed. Tell you what, she said. We have an old typewriter in the closet. I could let you use it. Thanks, Mrs. Bindell. But after typing for the longest time, I was still working on Babar Strikes Again, and the wastebasket was full of my mistakes. That's when Mrs. Bindell suggested I handwrite my newspaper. I said that was fine with me, because everyone in New York knows I have the best handwriting in the whole 4th grade. And you'd better use a stencil, Mrs. Bindell said, because our copying machine is down again. I'm waiting for the repairman to fix it. A stencil? I said. What's that? It's what you'll need to use the old mimeograph machine. Mimeograph machine? What's that? It's what we used in the old days, before we had copy machines. I helped her dig it out of the closet. It looked even older than the typewriter. I found out pretty fast that it's not so easy to write your best on a stencil. I kept goofing up, and none of my lines came out straight. They all ran downhill. I threw away the first 2 stencils and made up my mind that the third one would be it, no matter what. Across the whole top of the page, I printed, News Date by Sheila the Great. That looked really neat, except it took up a lot of the room. So by the time I got to my crossword puzzle on the bottom of the page, I had to make it very small. I think I spelled counselor wrong, but you can't erase when you're using a stencil, so I had to leave it that way. By the time I finished drawing little pictures of all of our activities along the side margins of my newspaper, it was time to go home, and I was glad. On Friday morning, I was ready to use the mimeograph machine. I thought I'd zip out the 75 copies I needed and still make it back to poetry. Denise would probably let me use the wheel the whole time because I hadn't had a turn all week. But I discovered that you can't just zip out copies on an old mimeograph machine. For one thing, the machine uses a special kind of ink. And after half an hour, my hands were full of it, but the machine didn't have enough because every page came out blank. So I poured in a ton of ink, and then when I cranked out the first few copies, big blobs of purple were all over the paper, and you couldn't read anything I'd written. That's when Mrs. Bindell said she would get the machine going for me. I told her, what this camp needs is better office equipment. You'll be more experienced next week, Sheila. It probably won't take so long then. I didn't want to think about next week, or the week after that, or spending the rest of the summer putting out the camp newspaper. 2 hours later, I was still cranking out copies. They looked better than the first batch, which I had to throw away. This time you could read practically everything, but the pictures in the margins weren't too clear. Still, if you looked hard, you could see that they were pictures. I couldn't understand why the crossword puzzle came out with such wavy lines, though. But at least I had my 75 copies of Newsdate ready. I didn't much care how they looked anymore. I was so glad to be done. I took my 75 copies, yelled goodbye to Mrs. Bendel, and ran out of the office. I personally handed a copy of my newspaper to every kid in camp. When Mouse saw it, she said, "What kind of newspaper is this?" And I said, "What do you mean by that?" She said, "I've never heard of a newspaper that's handwritten. It doesn't even look like a newspaper to me." "Well, that's how much you know," I told her. "Anybody can type out a newspaper. It takes special talent and a lot more work to handwrite one." "What are these funny smudges up and down the sides of the paper?" "Ha! Funny smudges? You must need glasses. Anyone with eyes can see their pictures of our camp activities." "No kidding," Mouse said, looking closer. "All I see are ink blots." "You better have your eyes examined," I told her. "Everyone else in camp knows that they are pictures." That's when Russ came up to me and said, "Hey, Sheila, why didn't you get my mother to help you? Then you wouldn't have gotten your papers all smudged up." Before I had a chance to say anything, two big boys walked over to us and handed me the finished crossword puzzle. "Okay, Sheila the Great," one of them says, "what's the big prize?" That's when I realized I didn't have a prize to give. I was so sure nobody would be able to figure out my puzzle. "Well," the other boy said. I had to think fast. How would it look if Sheila the Great didn't have a super prize to give? "Congratulations," I said. "You are both very lucky, very lucky, very, very, very lucky, lucky, lucky." "So what do we win?" they asked. "You win the camp newspaper! That's what you win! Next week you get to run it all by yourself. Unless, of course, you feel you need a committee. Most people aren't able to run newspapers by themselves." "Some prize! I knew you'd think so," I told them, smiling at Mouse and Russ. That night, I made up my mind that the next time I think up a great project, I will be the boss and my committee workers will do everything else. That is the end of chapter 9. But just like we did at chapter 8, I want us to stop, like good readers do, and think about what we just read. Who were our main characters? Luckily, in a chapter book, it's probably the same characters as before. What did they want in this chapter? Was there a new problem? Any new solutions? Any new lessons learned? Remember, the best part about a chapter book is that each chapter is a new piece to the story, and each chapter usually has its own central idea. So, like I said, you can tell your central idea, five-finger fiction, to your family, or you can pick up your phone and tell Wilbur your central idea. You can't tell anybody, but Miss Turnquist snuck to Equitas yesterday and got Wilbur and a few other tools for us to use during our new virtual learning that's going to be happening online soon. So, before we go, tell your family or Wilbur the five-finger central idea of chapter 9. What did we build on to our story of Sheila the Great and her time at camp? All right. Bye, Wildcats. I love you so much, and I can't wait to read with you again tomorrow. Bye-bye.